Ever wonder what Spider-Man games never made it out of production for gamers to enjoy? Find out in every cancelled Spider-Man game deluxe, Game Facts Special! There are cancelled Spider-Man games for multiple Xbox consoles, Wii, PS2, PC, and more. We found at least 13 to talk about in this episode. SpiderMan The Great Web. After many years of disappointing Spider-Man adventures, Insomniac Games stepped in and knocked it out of the park with Marvel's Spider-Man in 2018. Then they did it again with Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales in 2020, and once more with Marvel's Spider-Man 2 in 2023. The team at Insomniac very clearly have a good thing going, and the critical acclaim for their Spider-Man titles appears to be keeping both Sony and Marvel happy. So, it wasn't a shock when the great Insomniac hack of December 2023 revealed the existence of SpiderMan III on the studio's roadmap. What was interesting, however, was the existence of a game titled SpiderMan The Great Web. This project was reportedly planned to be a live service 4-player co-op game with customizable spider people that would play with the vastness of the Spider-Verse. Deep character creation, all the way to your unique hero's origins, was stated to be a feature. Unfortunately, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier has sources that say The Great Web was actually cancelled quite some time ago. It's also not present on the most recent roadmap for Insomniac, which seems to line up with Schreier's findings. Spider-Man and Hulk game? On our original Spider-Man cancelled game video, commenter Isaiah Hatch mentioned a deal between Activision and Vancouver Institute of Media Arts, VanArts, to have some students do development work on a Spider-Man and Hulk video game in 2004. According to Isaiah Hatch, the deal got so far as signing NDAs. But ultimately, the game was cancelled in pre-production, and the VanArts students never worked on the game. Isaiah Hatch went on to speculate that the studio for the game must have been located in Vancouver, BC, Canada, the same location as VanArts. Spider-Man 4, Xbox. While Sam Raimi was working on the embattled sequel film to Spider-Man 3, a video game adaptation of what was planned to be Spider-Man 4 was also in production at a few different studios. Radical Entertainment was enlisted to develop the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC versions of the game. The game would have been structured much like the previous two Spider-Man film adaptations, featuring an open-world map of New York City with various side missions and collectibles. When the Spider-Man 4 film was shut down on January 11, 2010, work on all versions of the video game accompaniment was also cancelled. The cancelled project first surfaced on June 7, 2019. This was the day a senior environment artist at Radical Entertainment by the name of Wayne Dalton updated his ArtStation page with a handful of screenshots of a PS3 build, as well as some details about Spider-Man 4, mostly relating to how the work they did was used for Prototype 2. Hey, at least it didn't go to waste! Obscure gamers found and leaked a build of the Xbox 360 version of the game, dated October 16, 2009, on September 11, 2021. It's estimated that Radical's version of the game was only 10 to 15% complete at the time of cancellation, and what was there was based on the first prototype game. Spider-Man 4, Wii. Radical handled the main version of Spider-Man 4 the video game, while the Wii version was handed to British game studio Eurocom, and Vicarious Visions handled the Nintendo DS version. We saw this Wii version of the cancelled Spider-Man 4 video game on September 10, 2019, courtesy of X-user Andrew Early7. The build he found, dated January 15, 2010, was on an RVTH, a development kit for the Nintendo Wii. Andrew obtained the hardware from Eurocom, and later shared his findings with the YouTube channel Hard4Games, which went on to make a video that discusses the materials at length on November 30, 2019. Apparently, this Wii version of the game was completely different from Radical's version, running on a different engine, Eurocom's Engine X, and being much more linear. Just one day later, Internet Archive user DiskHacker uploaded the game files, making them available to the public. Around the same time Eurocom was developing Spider-Man 4, they created another Spider-Man game prototype, simply called Spider-Man. The game used many of the same assets, and probably a lot of the code from their cancelled Spider-Man 4 release. It's speculated that Eurocom began work on this Spider-Man game once Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4 was cancelled in favor of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Gameloft Spider-Man games. Between 2009 and 2014, mobile game publisher Gameloft developed and released a total of 6 Spider-Man games for smartphones. The titles were Spider-Man Toxic City, BlackBerry and Windows Phone, Spider-Man Ultimate Power, iOS, Android, and Windows Mobile, Spider-Man Unlimited, iOS, Android, Windows Phone, Ultimate Spider-Man Total Mayhem, iOS, Android, BlackBerry Playbook, and the 2 Amazing Spider-Man mobile games for iOS and Android. Many of these titles were well received for their time, but all of them have since been removed or otherwise discontinued. The biggest loss out of all of these was Spider-Man Unlimited, an endless runner that was announced in June 2014 and released a few months later in September 2014. It featured all manner of characters from throughout the Spider-Man universe, including Spider-Ham and Spider-Man 2099. New characters were also added in updates periodically. Also included in the more than 30 updates it received were new story chapters to extend players' enjoyment of the game, new enemies and stages, and event quests. Spider-Man Unlimited even had tie-in content for Avengers Infinity War developed for it. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to keep the game going, because by the end of March 2019, Gameloft had shut the game down due to declining engagement. But with over 30 million downloads, it was far from a failure. As of 2023, Spider-Man Unlimited has been unofficially brought back thanks to a revival project headed up by Zen Gaming. Additional suits have even been added to it thanks to a team of modders. The rest of the Spider-Man games from Gameloft haven't been so lucky. Ultimate Spider-Man 2. Shortly after the release of the well-regarded Ultimate Spider-Man game in 2005, developer Treyarch began designing game assets and concept art for a potential sequel. They even managed to get Brian Michael Bendis, the writer of the first game and a prolific comic book writer, signed on to write the sequel story. According to Chris Salazar, the lead texture artist for the game, Ultimate Spider-Man 2's story would have taken place in the winter and featured Green Goblin as the villain, and perhaps a playable character. Due to the winter setting, the map would have been covered in snow, and Chris even made snow-covered trees and tile sets for snowy streets. Unfortunately, development didn't progress much past that point. Activision didn't believe an Ultimate Spider-Man sequel would sell as well as the Spider-Man 2 film tie-in did, so they canceled the project before it had a chance to get off the ground. SpiderMan Classic. SpiderMan Web of Shadows was a 2008 action-adventure game developed by Shaba Games and published by Activision, who held the publishing rights to the webhead for many years. Web of Shadows received only middling reviews from both critics and gamers, but it did have a few universally praised features. Among them was its implementation of aerial and wall-crawling combat. Shaba Games got to work on a sequel to Web of Shadows shortly after release, planning to expand on those few mechanics, as well as introduce Wolverine as a playable character after his appearance in the previous game. Shaba Games unfortunately shut down in the middle of 2009, while the sequel, tentatively titled SpiderMan Classic, was in pre-production. The only information available for SpiderMan Classic, outside of some concept renders and the fact that Wolverine was planned to be playable, was the game's format. Instead of an open-world game, SpiderMan Classic would have instead been a level-based game, in which each level was designed to lead up to an iconic villain, which would effectively put a more significant emphasis on the combat mechanics Web of Shadows was praised for. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time remasters. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time were going to receive the remastered treatment. This is according to an anonymous Reddit user who claims to have worked at Activision. Apparently, sometime after Activision lost the Spider-Man game license in 2014, they attempted to work out a deal with Disney to regain the rights. Had the deal gone through, we could have seen remasters of Shattered Dimension, Edge of Time, Ultimate Spider-Man, and more. Instead, every indication is that Marvel traded Sony the Spider-Man game rights in exchange for Spider-Man staying in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But we have no official confirmation of this. Xbox and GameCube ports of SpiderMan III. The video game tie-in to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 landed in 2007 for a smattering of consoles, including PC, GBA, Xbox 360, PS2, PS3, PSP, Wii, and DS. If the development of the game had gone according to the original plan, there would have been 2 other consoles appearing on that list. Both original Xbox and Nintendo GameCube versions of Spider-Man 3 were planned, but each one was scrapped for different reasons. The GameCube version was shut down due to the limited availability of resources on Activision's behalf, as they were also developing Shrek the Third for the console. The original Xbox port was cancelled because of the system's low sales numbers around that time. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 video game tie-in was released in a strange era for Activision. Back in 2003, the company signed a licensing agreement with Marvel to produce video games, resulting in titles like X-Men Legends, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Marvel Nemesis: Rise of the Imperfects, and an absolute avalanche of Marvel film tie-ins. That original agreement was extended in 2009, right around the time that Activision's licensed Marvel games took a nosedive in terms of quality. The agreement was not renewed when it ended in 2014. In April 2014, Activision reported a delay in the Xbox One version of Amazing Spider-Man 2. Around this time, Xbox One was not selling well, and many websites speculated that the Xbox One version might be cancelled. This did not end up happening, and the game was released after a short delay. However, because of the lapse in licensing agreements between Marvel and Activision, this game, along with all Activision games, were delisted on January 4th, 2017. SpiderMan The Venom Factor. In 1996, Brian Price Multimedia and Brooklyn Multimedia released Spider-Man: The Sinister Six on PC. This Spider-Man adventure was structured like a Telltale game, in that it was a choose-your-own-adventure title with branching paths based on decisions and actions made throughout the game. A year later, in 1997, a sequel to that game was in the works, titled Spider-Man: The Venom Factor. Despite being included on developer Sapphire's website on its list of completed games, Spider-Man: The Venom Factor was never released. On the archived version of that very same website, you can find an image and a short cinematic from the unreleased game, which you can see now. Marvel Chaos. Marvel vs. Capcom kind of ruined the concept of Marvel fighting games. It's going to be incredibly difficult to make a game that tops that series, as was evidenced by Marvel Nemesis: Rise of the Imperfects. There was another attempt made at a Marvel fighter, but it just didn't get a chance to get off the ground. In 2007, EA Chicago was working on a game called Marvel Chaos, which was to be a third-person brawler starring a roster of iconic Marvel characters. Only 9 months into development, EA shut the project down after reports that the game was suffering from severe quality issues. EA's Chicago studio was also shut down shortly after, most likely due to the failure of Marvel Chaos. Unseen64 has plenty of screenshots of the unfinished game, which definitely seem rough. They do, however, show some gameplay of a classic comic-suited Spider-Man posed on top of a car and in mid-assault of Dr. Doom. There's also some rough footage of a gameplay prototype that gives a better idea of how the game would play. Spider-Man 2: Enter Electro. In 2000, Activision released a wildly popular and successful Spider-Man game on the original PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and the Sega Dreamcast a year later. It was actually one of the first games developed by Neversoft, who had just released the first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game the prior year. When the time came for a sequel to capitalize on the success of the first game, the approach to development was a little less focused. Spider-Man had 3 separate sequels developed uniquely for 3 separate consoles. Spider-Man 2: Enter Electro was developed for PlayStation 1, and was the closest to the first game mechanically. So why didn't the N64 or Dreamcast get a sequel to a game that had appeared on those consoles? In the case of the N64, it's difficult to tell, as the system was fairly popular. But for the Dreamcast, its exclusion could likely be traced to the success of the console, or lack thereof. The system was discontinued in March 2001 after many months of stagnant sales. This work was probably early enough in the development of Spider-Man 2: Enter Electro that any work that had begun on a Dreamcast version could be scrapped. Marvel 2099: One Nation Under Doom. In 1992, Marvel started several lines of comics that made up the Marvel 2099 universe. These comics followed far future versions of favorite heroes, including the Punisher, Ghost Rider, and, yes, Spider-Man. Several years into these comics' run, Mindscape Inc. announced that they would be making a video game based on the 2099 universe, which would be based on the One Nation Under Doom storyline from the comics, and feature 2D side-scrolling gameplay with 3D character models. That announcement was made in February of 1996, with an intended release date of December 1st of the same year. By May, video demos on CD-ROM and VHS were being shipped to the gaming press for evaluation, and then a single playable level was shown in July. EGM featured a preview of the game in August that showed screenshots of the E3 gameplay, but it also included the reveal that Spider-Man 2099 would be appearing in the game as a playable character. However, as 1996 came to a close, Mindscape Inc. suffered financial issues that led to significant layoffs. This decrease in workforce caused the development of Marvel 2099 One Nation Under Doom to be abandoned, though it was never formally cancelled. Check out our videos on Ultimate Spider-Man's development, Marvel Spider-Man development, and the Amazing Spider-Man games development. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. This has been a GameFAQs special.